So if you happen to visit Rome, you might notice that there's a lot of obelisks standing around in the city. In fact, there's more obelisks in Rome than there are in Egypt. So there's 7 ancient Egyptian obelisks here in Rome that still stands, but in Egypt there's 7 obelisks still standing. In total there's 13 obelisks that you can visit here in Rome, but as I mentioned, 8 of them are from ancient Egypt. The rest of them are later replication by the Romans, who wanted more obelisks and didn't want to go to Egypt to fetch more of them. In total, it seems as from the historical sources that we have preserved to our days, they shipped between 40 and 50 obelisks from ancient Egypt here to Rome. So the first obelisk moved by the Romans is the one that we see behind us here at the Flaminian Square, and the obelisk is called the Flaminian Obelisk. And the obelisk was moved here to Rome on the order of Emperor Augustus, formerly known as Octavian. And this large stone obelisk out of Egyptian granite is weighing 263 tons. So this was not something they would be able to move quite quickly. They actually had to do a couple of trial runs. And these trials started in 13 BCE. Augustus then ordered 2 obelisks to be moved from Heliopolis to Alexandria. And this took a little bit, but they figured out how to do this well. They then move on in 10 BCE to move 2 obelisks from Heliopolis, one of which, the one that we see behind us here, and the other obelisk is today found at the square on Montecitorio. And Augustus ordered this movement of these 2 obelisks a bit to celebrate his victory over Cleopatra and Mark Antony. But there's more reason behind this move that we will get to in just a moment. And they managed to move these large stone pillars across the Mediterranean by using similar technology as the ancient Egyptians. So it seems, as according to the sources we have, that the Romans used a similar technology inspired by the ancient Egyptians' way to move the obelisk through the Nile. So they designed the ships in a similar manner as the ancient Egyptian stone-moving barges. But why did the Romans move so many of these Egyptian obelisks to Rome? Well, to answer this question, we need to go to a different location to figure this one. Well, to answer this question, we need to head over to another location. Come with. So it was here at Circus Maximus where Emperor Augustus placed one of the Egyptian obelisks that he brought back from Egypt. So the obelisk would have stood in the center of the spina in here. And that's also a reason why Rome brought in so many in the end, because later in Roman history, when you had these arenas for horse races, you wanted one in each end of the spina, so one over there and one over there. The second Egyptian obelisk that Augustus brought to Rome became part of his giant sundial. And while the Romans were awesome engineers, the moving of these giant obelisks was still viewed as quite an achievement in ancient Rome. So the ships that they used to transport these giant obelisks from Egypt here to Rome was often, when the task was complete, put out on display so the citizens of Rome could go and marvel upon these large vessels used to transport the obelisks. And if we read Pliny the Elder, he covers these just a few years after the first obelisks were moved here to Rome. And it's not really strange that the ancient Roman citizens looked upon these moves of the obelisks as quite technical achievements. The largest obelisk ever moved by the Romans were not the first one by Augustus, but a later obelisk known today as the Laternan obelisk. And this giant stone pillar weighs a whopping 413 tons. Once upon a time. Today it weighs only 330 tons, and it is because it was toppled over in an earthquake. Part of the obelisk, well, broke down and couldn't really be put back together with it. And something worth noting is that the Romans, while being more technically advanced, they used most of the same methods as the ancient Egyptians when they raised and transported these obelisks. The difference is that the Romans used pulleys, something that the ancient Egyptian during the construction of many of these obelisks did not have access to. Other than that, it was similarity in the tools and the ways they transported the obelisk. But when it came to, putting the obelisk up on this pedestal, yeah, they used pulleys. The ancient Egyptians method, we're not 100% clear on which method they used, if they built it up and then topple it over, if they built a larger hill and then just drag it up top and then slid it down on the other side. There's several different possible solutions to this that does not require a pulley system. But a pulley system isn't really necessary for raising an obelisk. As we talked about before, Wally Wallington from the US have demonstrated that with simple fulcrums and levers and plain sticks, you can by yourself, if you have some time on your hands, get these large blocks in place by yourself. He built his own Stonehenge in his backyard, if you're not familiar with this person. And while putting it on the spina in the circus, the racetracks, was one reason for these obelisks to be transported to Rome. It's not the only explanation for them, because later in Roman history there was a bit of Egyptomania. Cults dedicated to Isis and the Serapis started to become a bit popular, and they imported these obelisks to decorate these Egyptian Roman temples dedicated to these mystery cults. And this actually started with Augustus bringing the first two obelisks here to Rome. Before that, the Roman government, those in charge of Rome, were a bit skeptical to these non-Roman religions starting to pop up in Rome. Augustus managed to change this with these two obelisks that he imported here, because he did not only put them up for decoration, he also kept the meaning of the obelisks. They were a sort of sun symbol, and I talk more about this in the special episode about the obelisk, but he dedicated these obelisks to the Roman god Sol, the sun god within the Roman pantheon. And this opened up this Egyptian influence to start making its way into Roman culture, civilization, be accepted within the Roman society. But yes, this is why we have more obelisks in Rome than in ancient Egypt, because they were, exported out of the country. And it really shows that, if it was possible for the Romans, I don't think it was impossible for the ancient Egyptians either. I mean, they didn't really need aliens to solve this type of thing, as we see later in history.